I would like to show you a game notable for a fantastic, mysterious move. It's almost impossible to foresee the evil intentions behind this magic move, as at first sight it doesn't make any sense. However, it actually creates deadly threats to the enemy king. In his annotations, Bronstein writes that he saw this idea in a chess composition and was glad to realize it in a practical game. Bronstein's opponent started with d4, and Bronstein played the Bogo Indian defense, bishop b4 check, and after bishop d2 he defends his bishop by playing a5. Knight f3 developing, knight f6, knight c3, d6. Black's intention is to play e5 in order to attack the center. Queen c2, knight c6 and g3. White is going to fianchetto the bishop. And e5, attacking the center. The exchange in the center took place, and here White made a dubious move. Instead of a3, which was recommended by Bronstein, or simply developing the bishop, White decided to castle queenside, which at first sight looks very strong, because the rook is now attacking the queen, so there is a very unpleasant X-ray, and the king seems to be safe on the queen side because he has many defenders. However, as Bronstein will show, it isn't the case. So Bronstein now eliminates one of the defenders of the king by capturing the important knight and also vacating the b4 square for his own knight. And after bishop takes c3, White's position looks even more aggressive, because now White is attacking the queen directly, and also both pieces, the bishop and the knight, are attacking the central pawn. That's why Bronstein plays queen e7. And here again White made a mistake. Bronstein writes that it was necessary to play a3 in order to take under control the b4 square. Instead, White simply continues the development, bishop g2, and Bronstein immediately exploits that. As b4 square is unguarded, he plays knight b4, so his knight crosses the center, attacking the queen. And it turns out that if White captures the knight, then after a takes b, the rook, without making a single move, would turn into a very strong, very active piece, attacking White's weakness on a2. That's why after knight b4, as the queen is under attack, White plays queen a4 check. Bishop d7, the queen is still under attack, and queen a3. And now it turns out that the queen is actually out of play. Bronstein activates his bishop, bishop c6, and pins the knight. Now, if the knight moves, the bishop on g2 will fall. However, he leaves his pawn on e5 unguarded. As you see, it's defended only once, but both pieces attack it. So after bishop c6, of course, White cannot capture the pawn with the knight, because the bishop on g2 would fall, but White can capture it with the bishop, which White did. However, after short castle, it turns out that Black actually has a very good compensation for a pawn. Namely, the king is in trouble. As you see, it isn't very well defended anymore, and there are weaknesses in the vicinity of the king. Besides that, the e2 pawn is weak, so it will be under constant pressure, and the white queen is out of play. So, what to do now? Black has created an immediate threat, actually. Black is threatening to eliminate the defender of the bishop, namely capturing the knight, after which the bishop on e5 would fall. So Black is threatening to play bishop takes f3, and after White captures the bishop on f3, the e5 bishop would fall. And in case the bishop retreats, for example, to prevent the loss of a piece, the knight, the f6 knight, would be very strong. Black would play either knight g4 in this case, attacking f2, or knight e4, again attacking f2 and also the bishop. Besides that, the e-file would open and the e2 pawn would be under attack. That's why, after short castle, in order to prevent all this, White decided to capture the knight, and queen takes f6 followed. Now, White decided to continue the development. The only piece which isn't developed is the rook on h1. That's why White played rook d2, defending the weak pawn and also vacating the d1 square for the second rook, after which White was going to take under full control the only open file. And Bronstein made a strong move, bishop e4, and bringing the bishop into the attack. Now the knight and also the bishop are attacking the king on the queen side, and it looks quite dangerous. However, still it seems that black doesn't have enough attacking resources to create dangerous threats to the white king, and white simply finishes the development. Rook d1. And we have reached the critical position where Bronstein found his magic move. I will give you a small tip before pausing the video. First, this move looks like a passive move which has nothing to do with the attack, which doesn't contribute in the attack at all. However, actually, this move creates a deadly threat. Namely, after this move, inevitably, black will create a very strong, dreadful bishop and queen battery and create checkmating threats on the queen side. So now you can pause the video and try to find it. So, in order to create the battery, black could have played bishop g6, for example, intending to play queen f5, threatening checkmate on b1. However, of course, that would be too simple and that wouldn't work, because white would simply play knight h4, attacking the bishop, and black wouldn't be able to create the battery. Besides that, the b7 pawn would be under attack. Bronstein made a much more sophisticated move. He played h6. Of course, his opponent didn't understand what was going on, so he couldn't guess, he couldn't foresee Bronstein's intentions, and he simply played bishop h3 in order to unpin his knight. And now we can see the idea behind h6. The idea is to vacate the h7 square for the bishop. The bishop retreats to h7, and it turns out that black has created a deadly threat, namely queen g6, after which the battery will be ready and queen g1 checkmate would threaten. And Bronstein writes that only here his opponent realized what was going on, what Bronstein prepared for him. And he played rook d7 in order to vacate the d2 square for his king. So that after queen g6, black still could have played queen g6 in this position, but in this case the king would escape. But black still would have an overwhelming advantage. But Bronstein finds a stronger move. He plays rook e8, developing his passive rook and attacking white's weakness on e2. And if this pawn falls, then of course the rook will join the attack, and that would be simply catastrophic for white. That's why white plays king d2, defending the e2 pawn and also escaping the queen side, because the deadly queen g6 is coming, so the king tries to run away to the king side or to the center, and then later probably to the king side. And here again Bronstein could have played queen g6, after which he still would have had a very strong advantage, threatening deadly queen c2 check, and after the king retreats, checkmate on e2 would follow. But in this case, white could have tried to continue the resistance, for example, knight d4, taking under control the c2 square, and in case black plays c5 in order to kick out the knight, white could have played bishop f5, for example, as the knight is defending the bishop. But Bronstein made a much stronger move. Instead of queen g6, he used the fact that the rook and the bishop are placed on the same diagonal, and he played bishop f5 with the double attack, attacking both the bishop and the rook. And it turns out that actually white cannot capture the bishop, because after that black would of course capture on f5, and it turns out that black has created two deadly threats. First, queen c2 check, followed by checkmate on e2, of course, because the rook is attacking e2 also, and also attacking the rook, which is unguarded. And in case white plays king e1 in order to defend his rook and also running away so that queen c2 doesn't make any sense, the knight invades c2, and that would be of course a fork, and white would lose his queen. That's why after bishop f5, white finally brought into play his queen. But it was too late. Of course, now black simply wins a piece. Bishop takes h3. And after the exchange of the queens, white, of course, resigned. In case you liked this video, I recommend watching Bronstein's other games in these playlists. But first like this video and subscribe, as it's really helpful for the channel growth.